let's make our first containers of the season. And the bench that I ordered earlier this week has come in, and well, today's the day. We've talked about this a bunch on the channel, and the Colorado Blue Spruce is coming down. I'm standing here in front of my raised bed garden, and I like to grow some cut flowers as well as a few vegetables. But in recent years, I have noticed that this area is getting pretty shaded. The reason for that is because you can see here behind the garden, we have a number of native trees, some oaks, a sassafras, and even a native birch. And while the trees are beautiful, their limbs are starting to overhang this garden space. And in the morning, the sun comes up from that direction, and we're only getting a little bit of filtered light through those limbs of the tree onto the garden. And as the sun moves this way, it's full sun around midday, but as we get to the afternoon, we have another tree down here that's casting afternoon shade. George, come down and we'll talk about this tree. We called in an arborist to explain the situation and to see what we could do to kind of remedy the light conditions in this area. And he identified this tree here as a swamp willow, which makes a lot of sense because this area is a little bit wet and willows love water. And at first it was growing kind of slowly, but last year it got really large, and I noticed that it was casting a ton of shade in this raised bed garden. And in fact, my dahlia production really took a hit. I had a lot less flowers than I had had in prior years. So this tree has to go. It's going to get cut down completely. And let me show you another tree that has to go. And this tree here is a native birch, and it's also a really pretty tree, but it has gotten really large. And this has been casting shade over this garden for a few years now. And actually last year, George had gone up on a ladder and he pruned this tree back quite a bit, taking off some of the limbs that were overhanging the garden. But it continues to be really vigorous and grow. And it is just going to continue to grow, meaning that it will always be a problem for us in this space. So for that reason, this tree also has to go. And here in this area is where we have those native oaks that need some trimming. And when we were speaking to the arborist, he suggested that to not compromise the health of the tree, to only take off about 1/3 of the canopy. So they're going to actually climb up the tree, which will be really interesting to watch. And they're going to take off a portion of the canopy that overhangs the garden, which should really improve the light conditions in this area. And my beautiful Colorado Blue Spruce. I've talked about this tree a few times on the channel, and it's something I'm really conflicted about. But unfortunately, this tree does have to get removed. 12 years ago, when I was a newer gardener, I actually planted this tree here too close to my house because when I read the tag, it was called a baby blue eyes Colorado Blue Spruce, and I mistakenly thought that that meant it was a dwarf tree, and it is not. And it has gotten quite large, and it's only going to continue to get larger. And George has had to trim the backside because it's rubbing on our siding, and it has already gotten taller than our home. So while the arborist is here, we're going to have him remove the tree and grind down the stump so that we can plant something in its place that's going to be more size appropriate. We also considered having the tree dug up and moved, but it is a process that's quite expensive, and there is no guarantee that this mature tree would survive the transplant. We even contacted local towns around the holidays to see if we could donate this tree for a tree lighting ceremony. We even had one person come out to look at the tree, but because the back has been buzzed down and it's only pretty 3/4 of the way around, they couldn't use the tree. So we've exhausted all of our options, so unfortunately this tree does have to get removed. And on to some other things that are happening in the garden. In last week's video, I mentioned that my Dr. Merrill magnolia was just starting to crack bud, and look at it now. It's so much further ahead than it was last week, and it'll probably be in full bloom by the weekend. It's looking gorgeous. Look at this. Such a beautiful pink tinted center, and it is so fragrant. I absolutely love this tree. I also went through and I pruned my quickfire hydrangea and all of the astilbe. I fertilized them so they are done for the season. And we also took all of the pots that we put in the shed to overwinter, the Japanese maples and the potted roses, out because it started to get a little bit warmer and I didn't want them to get too hot in the shed. So here are all of the pots starting to get acclimated to the outside temperatures. My hope is that they'll break dormancy out here, and I can see that my roses, they already have their buds swollen and they're starting to leaf out. Now this is my rose ICU. I've talked about it on the channel before. These were roses that I had planted in a bed in the garden that retained a little bit too much moisture. And roses prefer a well-draining soil in full sun, so they were quite unhealthy. So I potted them up, and this is the third year that I've been growing them in pots, and they're looking much better. I pruned these roses and took out any dried or dead wood canes, any canes that were crossing or any that were just really thin, and left the thicker, healthier looking canes. And I also applied some rose tone fertilizer. But I'm probably going to keep them in pots one more season until I find a more suitable spot for them in the garden. These corn steel planters, I also went through and cleaned them up. I had left the perennials in here up over the winter because when I leave all the foliage, I feel like it insulates the root ball a little bit better. And I'm happy to report that after cleaning them up, I can see that I have a bunch of growth coming out from the soil. So it looks like this Hakonokloa Japanese forest grass made it. This is a fern, which ferns are always late to emerge, so that one probably won't show any signs of growth for a little bit longer, although I can actually see a little bud there, if you can notice that. So I think that that's okay. And the heuchera is fine in pushing out some new foliage. So that's great. Typically when you have perennials and planters and you keep them outside over the winter, you want them to be at least 2 zones hardier than your growing zone. And we're in a zone 6B, 7A, and these are all rated down to a zone 5. So I think just leaving that foliage up over the winter definitely insulated them a little bit, and they came through. So that's great. Here are the potted Japanese maples. They're also all budded up. They have nice swollen buds, and they're going to start to leaf out pretty soon. So we have these 3 here. This one's actually putting on quite a bit of height, so eventually we'll have to find a spot in the garden for it. And this bench that we have here, I had purchased last year when we did our patio makeover in this area, and we bought it to replace a metal bench that had gotten pretty rusty, and we wanted something that could stay outside year-round and that was more weatherproof. So we found this bench that is weatherproof. It's made out of a composite material, but we had many of you asking about the bench because it has a really cool little feature. It actually has a cup holder, and at the time the bench had gone out of stock, so it wasn't available. But recently I went to go look for another one to buy, and it's back in stock, so I thought I would show it to you. So you can see it has a spot to put a wine glass or to sit a cup, so if you're out in the garden and you want to take a little break, you have a place to sit and to set your drink down. So I went ahead and I ordered a black one for another area in the garden now that they're back in stock, right in time for spring. Take a walk with me and I'm going to show you where I'm going to put the black bench. So here we are in our Japanese maple garden, and across the way is where our raised bed garden is. I know sometimes on video it's hard to kind of orient yourself to know where you're at, right? So I'm walking you through. And we have this gravel path that takes you down to the raised bed garden. But right in this area to the left of this path is a small bench that is decorative. It's really kind of small to sit in because I think it's either a children's bench or was made to maybe be a plant stand. But I think this is a perfect spot for a bench. We're going to do a little bit of work in this area this season. I have 3 ivory halo dogwoods, which you can't really see now because they're kind of dormant, that I had to cut back quite significantly because it had some dieback on it. This one still has 3 branches. That one in the center doesn't look like much is going on, and the one all the way to the left has a little bit of growth on it. So my idea is to have 3 fairly large shrubs growing in this area as a backdrop with a bench, and we're going to do something on the floor. You can see I already started to place some scrap pieces of flagstone that we had to kind of get an idea to make a little platform for a bench, and probably some wood chips or something on the floor around it, or even gravel. And look at this. When you turn around and you sit in the bench, you can see this woodland tree ring that we have, which needs to be cleaned up, but we have some daffodils blooming. These are the tete-a-tete, the little short ones, petite daffodils. And you can see our Japanese maple garden right through the trees. So I think this will be a really lovely space to sit in. So my plan is to get a black bench to put in this area, a full-sized black bench to match the black on our raised bed garden fence and the arbor. And I think that will look really nice. And right here in the center of this path, I planted a Korean spice viburnum, which they are beautiful and smell amazing. And currently it's more of a shrub, but as it grows, my plan is to limb it up and make it like a tree, so you can kind of walk under the canopy as you go to this more woodland area. Across the way, you can see I have my hillside garden that we have a 5-year plan for. This is year 4. So last year we did a good amount of work on it. In the fall, we planted some more conifers, and this area is just going to have evergreen ground covers, conifers, and shrubs. So it can be really low maintenance, but still really beautiful. And this season, we're gonna figure out a more permanent edging solution, plant a few more things, mulch it, and eventually we're going to have to cover all of this fabric that we talked about before that is just suppressing some really obnoxious weeds with either some wood chips or some gravel. And wouldn't that area back there make a really nice spot for a greenhouse? I would love that. Let's make our first containers of the season. I picked up this beautiful violet colored primrose a couple of days ago, and it is perennial in my zone, but I'm going to plant them in some spring containers and then we can put them out in the landscape. The variety is Colorado Blue Primrose. It likes full sun and it gets to be only 6 inches in height and 10 inches in width. There's a bunch more buds coming up here, so I think they'll look really pretty with some of the seedlings I'm growing in that Dusty Miller. And here it is. I placed it on the front porch with my other planters that have spring blooming bulbs in them. Tulips, daffodils, hyacinth, and pretty soon, probably in the next few weeks, they will be in full bloom. But I really like the way that these turned out. I was able to reuse the Dusty Miller that I started from seed. I popped the primrose in there, which is a perennial that I can then use in the landscape. And here is some of the alyssum that I started from seed. It's actually already blooming. And I placed the other one on the other side, and I cleaned up all of the tattered foliage on the Dusty Miller, and it's already pushing out some new growth. So this should fill out in no time. And if you haven't grown alyssum from seed, another super easy annual to grow. These are about maybe 8 weeks now, and they're already blooming. I started them at the end of January, and now we're at the end of March. Well, it's been a few days since I last filmed, but do you notice something's missing? Yes, our beautiful Colorado Blue Spruce is now gone. The arborist had come by to do some tree work for us, and while here, they did take down this spruce. And it is bittersweet. I'm sad that it's gone, but I'm also excited about the prospect of looking for a new tree that will better fit this space. But I'm going to insert some footage here of when the tree work was getting done. I found the whole thing really interesting. So here it goes.
Up here, right?
Wasn't that really cool? I found the whole thing fascinating, and I definitely could not be an arborist because they were quite high up on those trees. This here is where we had that swamp willow, and it didn't look like a very large tree, but it definitely put up a fight, and it was all intertwined with some of these vines that are in this area, but they got it down, and now this opened up a whole lot more space and will let a lot more light towards my garden in the late afternoon. And right here is where we had our native birch, where this pot is sitting now on the stump, and I think that is also going to be super helpful with the light conditions in this area. And lastly, they went up and they climbed these two large native oaks and trimmed the overhanging branches that were shading the garden on this end. So overall, I'm really happy with the work that they did, and I think we're going to get a lot more sunlight in this raised bed garden this season, which means a lot more flowers. And the bench that I ordered earlier this week has come in, and George started assembling it. You've made quick work of this.
Yeah, it's like 6 pieces.
Not bad. So this is not sponsored. We paid for these benches with our own money, but I just wanted to share it because when I showed it in my video last season, we had a lot of questions about it and they had been out of stock. But it's looking really nice. I think it's going to be great in that spot. You're installing the cup holders?
It's everyone's favorite feature.
Yes, it is actually. It's a really good feature.
It's like a party trick. It's like,
yeah,
woo.
And there's one on both sides, so there's 2 cup holders. We placed the bench in its spot, and I think I'm really going to like it here. And I love the way that it coordinates with the aesthetic of our raised bed garden. As we were walking by to place our bench, we noticed that the Dr. Merrill Magnolia is pretty much in full bloom now, and we're due to get more rain and wind in the coming days, which means it'll probably knock off a lot of these gorgeous blooms. But it smells so nice over here, and this is absolutely my favorite blooming spring tree in our garden. So thank you so much for spending your time with me, and I'll catch you in the next one.